I call the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Mr Chairman, it's my pleasure to be here as a representative of West Auckland, the electorate of New Lynn, which encompasses the wooded areas of Titirangi, of Woodlands Park, Langholm, and up into the Waitakere Ranges. And it is, as my good colleagues are saying, an electorate of trees. And my good colleague Phil Twyford there, of course, in his electorate, he looks up at those trees and, you know, wishes that Te Atatu went further up in the hills, so he could say this, but hey, he's going to be supporting very soon. Mr Chairman, this is a really important bill from a number of points of view. It continues a trend which is now starkly evident to the New Zealand public, that this government cares not a jot for community decision-making and participation. Instead of working with communities, they've decided to do things to communities, and this bill is one way that is being foisted upon a fairly unsuspecting public. Of course, we know the agenda is not limited to this. It's all about ramming casinos down the throats of people who can't afford to play in them. It's about ramming mass surveillance down the throat of New Zealanders who don't want to be spied on, and the agenda goes on and on and on. But for now, Mr Chairman, we are limiting ourselves to this RMA amendment bill. Mr Chairman, my constituents are by and large incensed by this legislation. They're incensed by it because they have worked hard through the democratic process, both locally and nationally, to make clear time and time again through the ballot box that they want the Waitakere Ranges to stay green. They do not want the death by 1,000 cuts of the incremental effects of subdivision up in the Waitakere Ranges. They do not want blanket chainsaw massacre tree felling being available without a proper resource consent. Now, the member who previously resumed her seat said this bill was all about lightening the compliance burden and making sure people could reasonably trim trees without having to get consents. Mr Chairman, the rules currently are that any person in that area can trim 20% of the volume of their tree down to a level of 2 metres above the ground without a consent. Without a consent, on the law as it currently stands, Mr Chairman. What the National Party wants is for those trees to be, quote, trimmed off at ground level with a bulldozer or a chainsaw. It is the chainsaw massacre. Thank you, Mr King, a man known for sharing his wisdom around the country. We appreciate that. Mr Chairman, let us analyse the government's claim that they have somehow fixed the problem and thereby saved Paula Bennett's chances of re-election, because it is a spurious claim, Mr Chairman. The draft, sir, as received by the House and the Select Committee, says in 4C, to avoid doubt, each of the following descriptions of a group of trees does not satisfy the identification requirements. Number 1A, all trees of one or more named species in a defined area or zone of the plan. B, all trees in a class with defined characteristics in a defined area. For example, all exotic trees over 5 metres high in a certain area. Or C, all trees in a named ecosystem. Mr Chairman, the law is specific that none of these types of classifications can stand. Now, why is it ruling out the classification of groups of trees? And it's quite simple, sir. Because the Auckland Council went to the Environment Court and got a decision from Judge Jackson which said that group classification was legal under the Resource Management Act. And it was that decision, sir, which spurred the draconian amendments brought forward in this bill, which required each individual tree, if you please, to be individually and specifically notified and scheduled under the Act. How can that be a move to reduce compliance costs? Goodness me, there would have been more trees felled to provide for the paperwork of scheduling every tree in the Waitakere Ranges individually. I've never heard of such a nonsense. Westies are incensed. They passed the Waitakere Ranges heritage area bill through this Parliament to make clear to all that they wanted the ranges protected. Mr Chairman.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
So in light of that, what has the government now done? They've said, never mind folks, we know we're overriding local democracy, we know we are becoming a property developer's dream, we know we're facilitating the bulldozers, but wait, there's good news. We are only going to do it not on the basis of scheduling each individual tree, we're now going to allow clumps of trees provided they are done for each individual property. What's the problem with that, Mr Chairman? The answer is very simple. The property definition here is under 4 hectares. So there are lots and lots and lots and lots of properties. The compliance burden is still enormous, and the bill still changes the effective presumption away from the fact that trees across the Waitakaris would be subject to certain levels of protection unless otherwise exempted, to one which says nobody's protected unless each individual property writes it up. And that is the problem with this bill. That is what's got West Aucklanders talking over their teacups and their water coolers at the workplace, across their breakfast tables, where mothers are reassuring their children it's still safe to walk to school because the National Party hasn't bulldozed the shade just yet, but they're on their way. Mr Chairman, the amendment introduced in the Select Committee is simply insufficient. I join with my colleague Marion Street in acknowledging the Minister's made an attempt, but we aren't fooled. We know that this is not a genuine that's probably true of this national government, a Damascus moment where they've seen the green light, Mr Chairman. This is not a Damascus moment. This is a Paula Bennett moment. Paula Bennett's gone to Amy Adams and says, look, I've done some polling. It's 70-30 against your stupid bill. We need an amendment. We need a fig leaf. Otherwise, I'm a goner. I'm sitting on a majority of only 20 votes. 20 votes! That's less than Phil Twyford canvasses before morning tea on a Saturday morning. That's why Paula Bennett's a gone-burger. Paula Bennett's a gone-burger. She will not be in this Parliament as an electorate member after the next election because of this. Why doesn't the member for Central Otago stick to wilding pines? Because it's fine to fell wilding pines in Wakatipu. It is not fine to fell kauri trees in Titirangi. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
I call the Honourable Member Jackie Dean.
Thank you very much.